You just got wrecked.
What's going on, guys? It's K-Dub here with another episode of CryptoZombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having an awesome day today. Lots of people saying they're getting absolutely bored with this Bitcoin price. When Moon, when Lambo. Well, having a look right here, we did try yet again to get above the $9,600 level. We got rejected for the third time, and Bitcoin instantly started pushing downwards. Now, having a look over here, we do know that we have actually started to form a bit of a descending wedge, which could potentially be a bullish pattern. However, this could signal that Bitcoin prices could get a lot lower. Now, I did talk about my absolute worst case scenario in this video that I put out 2 days ago, if you guys had an opportunity to check it out, and I spoke about a $6,400 level. Now, some people think that that's not possible for Bitcoin to get down to that level again, but what I do want to point out, and shout out to Philip Swift for this, is the 2-year moving average multiplier essentially on Bitcoin, and I want to talk about maybe potentially the perfect buy zone for Bitcoin moving forward if you are deciding that you want to wait on the sidelines potentially for the perfect opportunity. That opportunity may not come, but I do want to discuss that today. And man, if Bitcoin does get down to these levels, well, you can bet that this guy is going in extra hard. So that's what I want to talk about today. Also want to discuss the fact that we did have Fidelity pretty much coming out with this survey saying that 26% of institutional investors do in fact have Bitcoin. And I also want to show you this interview with Jesse Powell and essentially go over, the fact that there is a lot of interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I'm going to show you exactly where that demand is coming from. Also, Bitcoin mining difficulty just did something pretty incredible. We're going to go over all that today. If that sounds good to you, you know what to do. And also, one thing else I want to talk about is something that is sort of bothering me recently in the crypto markets, just a little bit of a personal thing. I'll get to that a little bit later, but if all that sounds good to you, definitely get subscribed. Without further ado, let's dive directly into the chart. So having a look right here, you can see that Bitcoin did try to retest, actually we did perfectly retest down here to the 50-day moving average. We did have a nice bounce off of that, so it is nice to see that Bitcoin is still being supported by that. Now there's two different trends I want to show you. On the smaller time frame, you can see that we are in a bit of an ascending triangle right here. You can see every time Bitcoin comes down, we do actually start putting in a bit of a higher low. This is good short term. However, zooming out, you are noticing that we are actually, well, this morning we did put in a bit of a flag formation on CME futures, and we did start to fall to the downside. So some of the short term targets put us at around the $9,000 level. You can actually see if Bitcoin, now this is if we do continue to go to the downside. If Bitcoin does continue to go down here, we might have a little bit of a bounce off the $9,300 level before retesting right down here to the $9,000, $9,100 level. Also having a look right here, if we do have a look at this descending wedge that Bitcoin is putting in, this is on a little bit more of the macro. I am looking at the 4-hour, but I am taking it from the top where we did hit that $10,500 peak back in the beginning of June. And you can see right here, if we were to continue this pattern, this would actually push Bitcoin once again, potentially down to the, yep, you guessed it, $9,000 level. Now that could be the end. We could have the breakout after that, or you could potentially see Bitcoin winding its way all the way down lower and lower, maybe trying to retest some of these lower levels down here when Bitcoin was hanging around in the $8,700, $8,800 level before having the massive blast off, which I do anticipate that we eventually, most likely before the end of this year, will have a huge move to the upside, maybe even breaking the all-time highs. You can see right here on the log scale, we are still sitting nice above these levels, but I do want to point out what Philip Swift said, and he said, recent price action might be dull, but it is likely building up to a very big move, comparable with highlighted areas in previous cycles. And you can see that before a lot of these major moves, things do get very boring for Bitcoin. They go sideways, they go down a little bit, people lose interest, and then before you know it, you have the massive blast off. And keep in mind, time in the market is more important than trying to time the market, okay? You're never going to get the bottom right, and you're never going to get the top right. If you do, I don't know, congratulations, you should definitely get a medal, but most traders are not going to time the tops and bottoms. Dollar cost averaging is your best strategy, and when you look at where Bitcoin is located right now in its cycles, in its 4-year cycle, this is an excellent opportunity for accumulation. And also, not financial advice, also having a look at here, let me show you why this level is so crucial. Now, if you have a look at the 2-year moving average right here, you could basically see that we only dip below it for very short periods of time, and those times definitely are excellent opportunities to accumulate. So you can see we did it right there, and you can see we did it right here. But let me actually just get rid of all this and just get back to the simple chart. You could basically see that this level is sitting at around the $7,200 level. So that's where the 2-year moving average is located. And let me show you something else that's also pretty incredible. If we actually move over here to the recent area, let me go to the very, very recent, since we had the pump. You actually notice that a lot of the VPVR, which is not moving as I'm trying to do this, is, okay, well, the ultimate accumulation is down at the 3.6, but look at where it juts out right here. You see right above my head? One of the biggest areas of accumulation right here is actually at around that $7,200 level. So I do think that that is a very big level of interest, basically, for accumulation. We've seen Bitcoin hang around $7,200 a lot. In fact, my dad had called me earlier this year and was like, what is it with the $7,200 level that Bitcoin keeps hanging around? So, I mean, even he noticed it, right? So could that potentially be the best opportunity to accumulate cheap Bitcoin? It could be. Are you going to sit there and wait for Bitcoin to fall to 7,200 or 6,400 and keep all of your cash on the side? That's up to you. For me personally, I've already told you guys I do have a cash position sitting there waiting to potentially hop into Bitcoin. However, I do continue to dollar cost average, and I just still think that that is the best strategy. But you let me know what you guys think about that. But yes, guys, basically there was a new survey from Fidelity. And basically from November 2019 to March 2020, they said that 800 investors across the US and Europe were interviewed, and the survey spanned a variety of investor segments. They included high net worth individuals, financial advisors, family offices, crypto hedge venture funds, traditional hedge funds, endowments, and foundations. So there's a very wide spectrum of investors, and they found that 80% of them did say that they find crypto appealing. You can see right here, of those who invested, 59% of institutional investors in the United States have direct exposure to cryptos. Now, the reason that this is really awesome is this is not through options or futures or derivatives. This is actual physical holding of the underlying crypto asset, which does increase the demand for the cryptocurrencies. You can see Fidelity speculates more are holding the asset itself because of maturing custody offerings and due to increased familiarity with cryptos. 26% of institutional investors hold Bitcoin, while 11% hold Ethereum. So Ethereum is gaining in popularity. Overall, the survey finds that cryptos are now viewed in a more favorable light, with Fidelity stating in the US, the perception towards digital assets has improved since 2019, with the portion of US investors expressing a neutral or positive perception rising from 43% to 58%. So that's almost 60%. Think about that, how the sentiment has honestly changed. And before we move on, I do want to play this clip from a Bloomberg interview with CEO of Kraken, Jesse Powell. And he actually talks about, well, he goes into a lot, but the specific section that I want to focus on is basically they ask him, who is getting involved in crypto? Is it mostly retail? Is it mostly institutional investors? And I do think that you will appreciate this. So stick around, listen to what Jesse has to say, and then I'm going to go into something that does kind of bother me a little bit about what's been happening recently with crypto, and it actually is somewhat related to this interview. So check this out, and then we are going to talk about it.
Jesse, you know, it's interesting. You talk about how Bitcoin's had now a decade behind it. And you think a decade ago, the buyer of this has sort of been an aloof, mysterious figure. We didn't know if it was your 18-year-old brother in the basement buying Bitcoin or there was an institutional investor behind it. Who do you see as the real buyer at this point for demand pushing up Bitcoin?
In the past 3 months, we're seeing a massive influx of new accounts from all personas. So we're seeing hedge funds, we're seeing wealth managers, we're seeing retail investors, we're seeing day traders. Everyone is signing up for it. I mean, I think we all know a lot of people have a lot of free time at home these days. People are taking their stimulus checks and rolling it into Bitcoin or the stock market. So there's been a massive new number of signups. I think people are very worried about the traditional markets and what's happening with the US dollar. And they're looking for a safe haven asset.
But it doesn't really act as a safe haven, or I mean, to the extent that
people have to liquidate when they need cash. When there's a dash for cash, it's hurt in the same way that we saw gold sell off to a certain extent. But you say Bitcoin is predictable, but it's just not. I mean, we've had the heady highs of $20,000 and now we're back down to $9,400. I'm interested as to what regulation and what infrastructure is really needed there so that we stop worrying about whales in the system. We stop worrying about its manipulation being pushed and pulled to particularly Bitcoin itself in various price points. And instead it actually becoming an easier access that institutional buyers can feel safer using.
Yeah, I think institutions getting comfortable with it is sort of a herd thing. They look to each other to see what they're doing. They want to be able to have someone else to point to when things go wrong. They don't want to be the only one sticking their neck out. So they very much move as a herd. As far as the volatility of it, just look at the traditional markets these days. It's all over the place. I mean, Bitcoin is the only thing you can look at over the last 10 years and see that it's up 1,000,000%. If you put any amount of money into Bitcoin 5 years ago or 5 years behind any point in time, you're up massively. Bitcoin in the last few months has returned more than the entire S&P 500. So, and when you're talking about manipulation, if you look at the Fed buying junk bonds from failed United States corporations, it's a joke. The market is manipulated. They're printing trillions of dollars to pump up the value of publicly traded stocks. You can't price anything in dollars anymore. The inflation is going to be out of control very soon here. Personally, I would be buying Bitcoin as a hedge against that inflation.
Lots of different things we could take away from this, one of them being the fact that institutions do tend to move almost as herds. Now, he has said that he has seen increased interest from institutions and retail, but the one thing that has become a little bit bothersome over the fact that we have seen all this institutional interest in Bitcoin, the good side is that it validates Bitcoin. The bad side is that Bitcoin really just seems to be following the same thing that the traditional stocks have been doing lately, right? Stocks have a big dump, Bitcoin has a big dump. Stocks have a big pump, Bitcoin has a big pump. Stocks start to pull back, Bitcoin starts to pull back, right? So the question is Bitcoin really starting to lose that sort of allure that it had, where it was the non-correlated asymmetric asset? This is something that does bother me. However, I do realize ultimately with the Fed continuing to print all of this money, I do understand the value proposition of the limited amounts of Bitcoin. But once again, then you discuss the fact that if you do have all these big custody solutions and they're hoarding all the Bitcoin, then does it just become like a super regulated market? And then, you could go on all day discussing it, but I just wanted to sort of just ramble on about that for a few seconds. Drop some comments below. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Bitcoin has just become totally controlled by the whales, totally taken over? It's not what it used to be. Do you think that maybe it just has to do because of what's been happening recently with the pandemic going on and a lot of the uncertainty and all of the unemployment? I mean, you have seen guys like Paul Tudor Jones putting their neck out on the chopping block, saying he's stepping up, he's putting in a big portion of his net worth into Bitcoin. So maybe there are some positives to this, but that is one thing that does concern me moving forward. However, I do think inevitably it was going to happen regardless, right, guys? But also want to talk about the fact that we have seen the highest jump in Bitcoin mining activity in quite some time. Last time difficulty jumped this high was in January of 2018 when it jumped 16%. You can see this is the highest it's jumped in 2 years, 14.95%. So this will cut mining profit margins, and yes, unfortunately, some of these smaller miners are going to be forced out of the equation. However, this is a good thing overall for Bitcoin because now you won't have the smaller guys who need to sell to basically cover costs. So overall, this actually is better for Bitcoin. Also, you guys remember that crazy Ethereum transaction that had $5 million paid in gas? Well, it looks like you had PeckShield, which is a blockchain analytics company. They found out that the originating address came from a Korean platform called GoodCycle. They are alleging that it looks somewhat like a Ponzi scheme, which would explain its rapid rise in popularity. And the analysts argued that due to GoodCycle relying on the pyramid scheme, it makes sense why they would not come forward to claim the money, as that would erode trust in the platform from its users and subsequently collapse the venture. So be careful of Ponzi schemes, my friends. And finally, William Shatner responding to CZ. saying Captain James T. Kirk of the U.S. Enterprise talking about crypto, and Shatner says, well, from what I recall, you were pulling out of the U.S. last year. You probably were a bit busy. You could have been our wallet partner and all kinds of fun things. Not sure what this beef is about. There is Binance US, but hey, just thought that was interesting. And on that note, guys, that is it for me. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I do know that the Bitcoin price is getting a little bit boring. There is that potential. We could go lower. We could see a $7,200 Bitcoin. We could see a $6,400 Bitcoin. But guys, ultimately, you know the trend. The trend is your friend until the end. Bitcoin has been trending upwards overall, logarithmically, for the past 11 years. Not sure why that would change anytime soon. Short term, buy the dip. Long term, you know where I put my money, and that is it for me today. Thanks again for coming back to the channel. You guys rock. You're the reason that I do this every single day. My name is K-Dub. This is CryptoZombie. Until next time, stay crypto. And of course, peace out.